everybody. Welcome to the latest episode of the Travis on Sports podcast. As always, I'm your host, Travis Tyler. Again, freelance sports writer, freelance sports blogger, and this is the show where I give my thoughts on some of the latest sports news, surrounding the sports world. It's Thursday, January 20th, 2022. Today, we'll be discussing the college football national title game, some coach and GM firings and potential replacements in the NFL. Super wildcard weekend in the NFL. A star joining his team just in time for the NFL playoffs. The latest in the Mlb Lockout and a couple more MLB retirements. Latest from college basketball. Some football transfer portal news and notes. A new constitution that was just ratified by the NCAA. NBA trade. A historic hire for the Yankees. A rule change, or a few rule changes really in minor league baseball, plus a star MLB free agent who's hired some new representation. There is a new GM for the Montreal Canadiens, plus updating on COVID testing, and what I hope is the final time we have to talk about this, an update on Evander Kane. Georgia Bulldogs are your 2021-22 college football national champions. They went 14-1 and won their first national title in 40 years. The season started with a hard-fought win over what was supposed to be a good Clemson team. Ended up being just a above-average Clemson team, not the usual Clemson seen the most recent years. And the lone blemish on the Georgia resume this year was the SEC championship loss to Alabama, which they avenged in the national championship game. Superb defense. Tons of future NFL players. If you look at the Senior Bowl roster, guys declaring, or guys who were expected to declare and just surprised by going back to school, a lot of them are Georgia players, especially on that defense. To beat Michigan in the semifinals, again, that defense was part of that. Also, their offensive line and their running backs played better than Michigan's did in that game, and they used, as they did most of the season, they used their tight ends with Darnell Washington and Brock Bowers, the freshman, who was phenomenal. Used them as what they were, they're complete mismatches against opposing defenses, and that worked out really well for them. In the championship game, it was a low-scoring game. I believe it was 13-12 at one point. And in the fourth quarter, Georgia scored 20 points and ended up winning 33-18. All Georgia's points were in the final 8 minutes, and turned a defensive slugfest into a pretty easy win for Georgia. Capped off by a Keely Ringo pick six just after Georgia had scored to go up by 8, and that pushed Georgia over the brink. And at that point, it already felt like Georgia was about to take over the game, and that just sealed it completely for Alabama. Congratulations, Coach Kirby Smart, the entire staff, and the players. The Georgia Bulldogs, your 2021-22 college football national champions. Also, congrats to the North Dakota State Bison in the FCS level, who won yet another national title over Montana State this time. The Bison have absolutely run that level for the past decade at least, and really should be getting a look at getting moved up to the FBS level soon. But, that's a whole nother issue and a whole nother process, whole nother discussion to go to. But again, congrats to the Bison. The NFL regular season is over. We had the first round of the playoffs over the weekend. I'll get to that in a minute. But with the end of the season comes several coaching changes and front office changes throughout the league. Here's what we know right now. We're about a week and a half, almost 2 weeks into the process here. There are 8 head coaching openings. Obviously, John Gruden in Vegas was let go after that email scandal and everything. And Urban Meyer was let go with his off-the-field stuff that was experienced and all that. In Jacksonville, those were your 2 in-season firings. After this season, Vic Fangio from Denver was the first one to go. Mike Zimmer in Minnesota also got the axe, as did Matt Nagy in Chicago, and Brian Flores in Miami, which was a surprise. A lot of people consider him one of the top coaches in the sport, and it wasn't really expected that they move on from him, especially after they kind of righted the ship after struggling out of the gate. The other 2 took a couple days. Joe Judge, I believe, was fired on the Tuesday. It's in New York with the Giants, and Houston's David Culley was fired about a week ago tonight. And right now you have one coach who's kind of in limbo, did a great job as the interim head coach in Vegas, got his team to the playoffs, and that's Rich Bisaccia, special teams coordinator, hasn't been told either way yet from what we've heard. Apparently, I don't remember who reported this, but he apparently had a meeting with Mark Davis reviewing the season and possibly talking about the potential to stay on as the head coach. But it's also not great that they fired general manager Mike Mayock after the season, particularly after the playoff season. Doesn't seem to bode well for Bisaccia's future there. And as we know, the Raiders, the Davis family, love to make explosive changes. They went with the home run hire for Gruden. It's been moves like that the entire time that they've owned the organization pretty much. And rumored to have interest in Jim Harbaugh. You know how that is. There's always people talking about, will he return to the league, and never does. And at this point, you're better off not buying into that than buying into it. But we'll see where that goes there. Guys that you're going to hear a lot for the coaching roles: Jim Caldwell, experienced head coach, been to a Super Bowl with the Colts. There's some debate on how much influence he had there, but you can't debate the influence he had when he was in Detroit. He took that team to a completely different level, a couple playoff appearances, right on the borderline of the playoffs every year, and players love to play for him. He'd be a great fit for someone who wants to instill a brand new culture and build a young team. Doug Peterson, former Eagles head coach, won a Super Bowl for the Eagles. That's always going to be appealing if you have a Super Bowl winning coach. Flores, obviously, because people didn't expect him to get fired. He's easily the most valued candidate, I would say, on the market. Cowboys defensive coordinator Dan Quinn is another one of those big guys. There are even people who want him made head coach in Dallas over Mike McCarthy if it comes down to losing him to another team or making him Dallas's head coach. He has head coach experience with the Falcons. He brought them to a Super Bowl, and he's also one of the architects of the Legion of Boom out in Seattle on those vaunted defenses. Josh McDaniels is always going to get talked about, especially now with Mac Jones having success as a rookie in that system. Things didn't go well for him in Denver, and he spurned the Colts after agreeing to become their coach. Honestly, I think both those teams are in a better place than he would have left them. But he's always going to be talked about, and I think he's going to get another chance as a head coach in the league eventually again. Raheem Morris, another guy who's been a head coach in Tampa, defensive coordinator for the Rams right now. Been a really good defensive coordinator wherever he's been. Another guy who deserves another shot, and so does Todd Bowles. The Buccaneers defensive coordinator, was a head coach with the Jets. His failure in New York wasn't really all him. There were a lot of other factors around him. And then you'll hear some younger, less experienced guys that haven't been head coaches. Matt Eberflus, the defensive coordinator for the Colts. Obviously, the Colts have built up a really good defense, and he developed really good linebackers wherever he's gone, and those linebackers, especially Van Der Esch and Jalen Smith in Dallas, have struggled since he's left their teams. Speaking of Dallas, Kellen Moore, the offensive coordinator, is kind of a boy wonder there. So is Rams offensive coordinator Kevin O'Connell. You've got Buccaneers offensive coordinator Byron Leftwich, who most of you probably know is a very accomplished quarterback in the league, played as a starter for a while. And has been there in Jacksonville before. Defensive coordinator Aaron Glenn from the Lions, is not coming from a great team, but that's because of a lack of talent on that roster. It still needs to be built up. He did about as good a job as anybody ever could with the hand he was dealt there, even having rookies and undrafted players starting key games and playing well. He has leader traits, and he's shown that he can develop talent as well in Detroit and in New Orleans. Jared Mayo, the linebackers coach for the Patriots, young up-and-coming. I don't think he's going to get a job this time around, but he's more and more in the conversation every year, as is D'Amico Ryans, the defensive coordinator for the 49ers, who deserves a lot of praise after this year. I believe they were the third best defense in the NFL, and so that can be tough to maintain when switching coordinators, and they did a great job in his first year as a coordinator. Mike McDaniel, 49ers offensive coordinator. This is his first year as offensive coordinator, and he definitely had his ups and downs. I have a bigger article about all these coaching candidates on my football blog, thefootballsavant.com. You can check that out more. The general manager openings, Ryan Pace was fired in Chicago, so was Rick Spielman in Minnesota, and Dave Gettleman with the Giants. It's officially a retirement, but a lot of people think he was forced out there. Also, as I mentioned, Mike Mayock was just let go from the Raiders. I don't think he did that bad of a job there. They became a playoff team. They competed. From what I can tell, people liked him. I wouldn't be surprised if he eventually got another shot. I'm not saying he's going to get one this year, especially with how late he was put out on the market, but we'll see. Wouldn't be surprised if he ended up back in TV too. But some of the names you'll hear for those GM roles, Ed Dodds, the assistant GM for the Colts, has been a top candidate for years. Thought that he might have a bigger influence in Indy than people actually know, and a lot of that is backed up by the fact that he keeps taking these interviews and withdrawing himself from consideration after an interview or two. And he just did that. The Chicago Bears. Joe Shane, the assistant GM for Buffalo, saw something that said that he may be the favorite for the Giants. And if you look at the way Buffalo has built itself under being over there with Sean McDermott, he's clearly going to be a top candidate on a lot of people's lists. I mean, there aren't a ton of GM openings this offseason, but he's clearly going to have a ton of interest there just because of what Buffalo has been able to do. Ryan Poles from the Chiefs front office is getting a lot of attention this offseason. Usually it's Mike Barganzi from that front office that gets the attention, but this year it's been Poles. Joe Horitz from the Ravens, he's the director of player personnel. He always gets a lot of attention. Adam Peters, the 49ers assistant GM, he always gets a lot of attention and has interviewed twice with the Giants so far. And I believe he's had a couple other interviews with other teams. Ryan Cowden and Monty Austinfort from the Tennessee Titans. Elliot Wolf of the New England Patriots is a front office consultant. He's worked in the Browns front office. His dad is a legendary front office executive, Ron Wolf from Green Bay. And Elliot himself has also been part of Green Bay's front office in the past. As I did with the coaches, I will have an article up about all the GM candidates that will include the guys I just talked about, plus a few others. For the teams that made the playoffs, last weekend was Super Wildcard Weekend. The weekend started on Saturday afternoon. First game was pretty intriguing with the Raiders and Bengals, two of the younger, less accomplished teams in the league who had probably better seasons than what we expected. Raiders got beaten badly earlier in the season by the Bengals, and this game ended up being a lot better. But it started out looking like it could be a lot worse. The Bengals raced out to 20-6 lead. It looked like they were running away. Then the Raiders got a big play on a phenomenal touchdown catch from Zay Jones, cut the deficit to 7 at halftime. That was unfortunately as close as it would get. Neither team was very successful on the ground in this game, and it was really a duel between quarterbacks and which defense could get a stop. Vegas cut it down to 7 multiple times. As I said, that was the closest they were going to get. Multiple times in the fourth quarter. It was just like trading field goals, basically. And Cincinnati's defense refused to break all the way down to a 4th and goal. I believe they were at the 4-yard line in the last seconds, and Jermaine Pratt, who was a late-round linebacker draft pick a couple years ago for the Bengals, picked off the pass in the end zone, and that was that. The second game, much less competitive. Patriots and Bills played a couple good games in the regular season. You'll probably remember that iconic snowy game in Buffalo where Mac Jones only threw the ball 3 times and the Patriots ran for over 200 yards. And then Buffalo came back in the second matchup and shut down that running game more. And they shut down that running game